So, all right, it says we're recording, so we should be good. Well, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Bikinis and Boarding School. It's been a little over a week since the last episode, and it's been a lot to go through these. It's really unlocked some memories, chapters of my life that I had kept closed for quite a while, and prompted some really deep conversations. And one of those conversations is with my special guest today. This is my sister, Lindsey Camarena. Lindsey is 3 years younger than me, and we're going to talk today about what our childhood was like, what it was like before I went to Holy Highway, and then really hone in on the impact that this chapter had on the siblings that were left behind, because most of us girls that were at Holy Highway had siblings that were left behind. So without further ado, Lindsey, can you give us a little update about you, your family, where you live?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to share. So my name is Lindsey Camarena. I'm the second born out of the family that Jill is firstborn in. And I actually, kind of lived a little all over since leaving home after high school. But right now I'm actually back in Kitsap County in Kingston, Washington with my family. So I have a husband and a couple dogs, a couple kids, and I'm a nurse. And yeah, pretty full, busy life. My kiddos are about an 11-year-old daughter, and I have an 8-year-old son. And it's, what's been interesting in hearing these stories is my daughter is pretty close in age to where I was at when Jill was sent to Holy Highway for the first time. So just seeing it through that parent lens of being in a similar age kind of demographic has been pretty wild, actually. But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks, Julie. I've been listening to, I think I've listened to all the episodes, and I guess my connection. I think this might be one of your questions. That my connection is that I'm a sister. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So as you're listening to some of these episodes, are there things that you remember me telling you over the years? Are there things that are shocking and new to you?
Yeah, I think yes and yes. It's weird because how the picture that you're painting, that I hear the other girls, I'll call them girls, women painting, is exactly what I imagine in my mind. So I think that your recollections are accurate to what you said in those years. Now I didn't see it. I never went there, but it's like I have visions of it in my head, both from pictures and from the stories, and what was said, like when mom and dad would go down to visit you or take you there. Some of the stories, I remember hearing stories about hard labor. I remember some of the extremism, some of the food stuff, bits and pieces, but I think in a much different way than you and the women who went there. But I've also compartmentalized and put that aside as something that's not talked about. So it is like bringing back a lot of feelings and thoughts, and even looking through some pictures last night of that time frame, our family really brought back those memories.
Right, right. It's I've referenced before, there's these chapters that we just don't read out loud for any number of reasons. They're not comfortable to revisit. But in visiting this uncomfortable chapter, I'm I'm experiencing a different level of healing, and just to be able to bond with people over a shared experience. And then in this case, to go back and talk about things that we just really haven't over the years. There's not really the occasion to sit down and go over this. Life gets busy and you just kind of forget about this chapter. Maybe you make a little mention in passing, but never a serious conversation. So it's cool to do this. And I appreciate you doing this in a public format like this, because I know that it is helping other women process what they went through, and hopefully their siblings too, because I know this did impact the whole family.
Yeah,
So what do
absolutely.
you remember, or how would you describe let's just call it the early childhood, so leading up to Holy Highway? What was our life like?
Yeah. So, interestingly, so when we were young, and Jill and I being the two oldest, our dad was a pastor. So we were in a pastor's family, and we moved all over Washington State to go and pastor these little startup churches, or go be the youth pastor here or there. So we had this pastor's kid kind of thing about our family, that even after our parents left the ministry and then moved back to North Kitsap, which is where our mom is from, and we have a pretty large family. Even moving back into that community, there was definitely like a precedent that we needed to behave a certain way, that we were in a certain family, a certain standard was there, and you knew like you're going to act a certain way in church and in public, and you need to be very, very religious and kind of just hold a high standard. It was so definitely like a patriarchal kind of an environment. My daughter was asking me about it actually this morning on the way to school, and it's like women weren't in leadership in the church, and you can fall out of the grace of not like towing the line of being a certain way. So yeah, in our family, our family was close in a lot of ways. I think in that like the siblings, like so it was a mom, dad, and two older sisters, and then the third born is a brother. I think Jill has mentioned too that may come on as a guest, who's a counselor, and then we have a younger sister. And I think like we're fairly close and we got along pretty well as siblings. We were raised pretty authoritarian. So, we were spanked. There was a spanking stick that got laid down if we're getting out of line. We
had our own version of hard labor.
we did. Yeah. We did chores, like some things that definitely instilled some good hardworking values, expected to get good grades, expected to excel in sports and win spelling bee competitions. And there was definitely like a high expectation, kind of a perfectionist environment. And that was definitely, I think, something that I think in a lot of ways we kind of rose to that challenge, but also I looked back at the kids we were and saw like the burden of that, the weight of that on the shoulders.
Right.
So yeah, that's some of my memories. I think, our parents did like coach teams, like Jolene mentioned, like dad was a basketball coach, and they were involved in volunteering in the church. And, I did feel a lot of love, but it was so intertwined with religion, and it's really interesting to look back as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that even when it came to discipline, the discipline wasn't being necessarily handed out by the parents. The parents were just the instrument to deliver the punishment from God, put in a position of authority. So yeah, interesting point that you bring that up.
Yeah. And I think I was listening to one of your episodes. It made me think about a time, and like somehow probably Holy Highway jived with our family in a way that made them think, yeah, this sounds great. I remember, and I wasn't the rebel of the family, but the second born does get a bad rap that way. But
yeah, no.
I do remember though being younger and being spanked repeatedly and being told, it was like I'd be spanked, left in a room, spanked, left in that room. And I was told, until you cry and your spirit breaks, we're going to come back and spank you. And so I let my spirit break. But having those like little memories, like make me think, anyway, some of the stories kind of brought out some of those memories.
Yeah.
Of a way that I wonder if a lot of the women that went to Holy Highway, it might have come from families, some that were like that.
Right. Oh, I think there was a handful that did. And those that came from a church upbringing, it's really interesting to talk about what our church experience was like in Texas, because, our church was fairly strict. I mean, maybe lacking some of the rules that the ultra conservative Protestant end of the spectrum of Christianity might have observed, with dress lengths and makeup and some of those harsher rules on women. But at the same time, it was strict, and then pick us up and put us down in Texas into an extreme non-denominational, holy roller casting out of demons style church. And a lot of us were overwhelmed when we got there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something, I think it might've been while you were in Holy Highway that I was coming of age, really. I was 12 when you were sent down there. And I remember sometime in the years between 12 and 14, I don't know if you were back during these times or not, but different members of the church who had sinned had to get up in front of the church and confess in front of the whole congregation. And a couple confessions that stood out. It was one of my friend's parents had to get up and confess about smoking weed in front of the whole church and the family sitting right there. And this is like one of my best friend's fathers. And I remember just feeling like really uncomfortable. I remember like one of our doctors it was our family doctor, had like cheated on his wife, and he had to get up and confess. It was just like, and even at that age, I thought, I don't think I need to know this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. I don't remember that. So that might have been while I was away. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I remember hearing about a couple stories, but such an interesting approach to call people out like that. And it really, I don't know, harkens back to times a lot longer ago than what we were experiencing then. I'm picturing like a small village and someone has sinned and they go before a council and have to answer for it as kind of their form of primitive judicial system, I guess.
Yeah.
But moving that burden of judge and jury into the church to kind of take matters of judgment into their own hands is just an interesting concept. So that actually really segues well into the next one of asking, what was the church community like? So there's a really good example. But, I would say it was also very children focused, or it seemed that way for us because we were involved in the kids choir drama program. We were in the town parade on the back of the truck singing and very involved in the community. The church was very involved in the community. There was a school that was attached to the church, which further solidified maybe that church's position in the community because there was a good percentage of kids that went to the private school that also went to the same church and Sunday schools.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would agree with you. Very, very kid focused. And I think that was kind of maybe part of the pull of when you became a teenager. It was almost like just wonderful to be a child, and you're innocent and you're a lamb of God and all this, and then you're becoming a woman and you're becoming a temptress and you're becoming a rebel, and you're the reason these men are sinning, and there was definitely that vibe. And I remember even like reaching puberty and being really angry about my body changing and not, it was they kind of, both the school, the church, it was very intertwined, but like, we're not going to have sex ed, we're not going to teach you about your body. And so a lot of like figuring out on your own or feeling some shame surrounding that was but yeah, which I hope some of that has changed today, but I do recall a lot of those feelings.
Right. I will second that with going through puberty and being told that this was the curse of Eve's sin and women's burden to bear and God's curse on women, essentially, that we would have to have this, and this is that we're all born with sin and this is our burden to bear. It was just an interesting concept, but it did create a lot of shame around it. It wasn't celebrated in this is beautiful and natural and is going to allow you to become a mother someday if you want to have children. It definitely made me take a different approach with my own daughter as she went through those years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how old were you? And what was that little period of time, kind of the run up to me going to Holy Highway? So August 22nd, 95 would have been when I went away.
Yeah, so I was between my 6th and 7th grade years in school. So I was 12 years old. And I remember, you would have been 15. And I do recall it didn't feel like unnatural to me, but just that, you were going to junior high and I was this kind of dorky 6th grader trying to figure it out. So I don't feel like we were as close that year before you left as we had been, but not in a way that was like, you'd still let me borrow your clothes. And, I remember you taught me to shave my legs. Like you were never like unkind to me, but it was just kind of that, like where we were at with the age spread. I do recall a lot of conflict between you and mom and dad.
Yeah.
Like significant conflict. I remember like having a friend over for a sleepover and like you and mom getting into a yelling match in the hallway. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed and not, just kind of awkward. And my friend had a brother that had a lot of conflict with her parents. And I remember her telling me, like, don't worry about it. I totally get it. Like, it's all good. Let's just stay in your room. And so mom and dad, I know like they were scared that you were going to run away. I don't remember exactly the specifics of what the conflicts were about. I feel like it was different things going on. And then, I think it kind of, like it culminated in, I remember mom like sleeping outside your room one night because she thought you're going to run away. I do recall that. You probably do too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then I do remember the day they brought you to Holy Highway. Myself and our younger siblings weren't told that you were going away. We were just told we were going. I don't even remember the exact chain of events, but I remember being dropped off at Grandma and Grandpa's and told you're not going to see your sister for a long time. And I didn't know what that meant, but just knowing, like, I didn't know. Does that mean a year? Does that mean a week?
Right.
You were just gone.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I actually didn't ever know that part. I didn't know where you guys were. Definitely didn't get to say goodbye to you. And then I want to say it was like almost the better part of a month until we got to even speak on the phone. Do you remember first communication or letters or anything like that?
Yeah, I do actually. I feel like it was longer till phone time, like
2 months.
more like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
I remember, and I don't think you were allowed to write a letter for quite a while either.
Right.
You wrote these amazing letters, and it was like we hungered for them. Like we were just, me and Scott and Kaylee, like I remember like being upstairs in Scott's room and like ripping them open, and it felt like Christmas morning, and just like you had wrote one to each of us. And I remember like you wrote my name in like cool block letters at the top of the letter. I literally remember the letter, and I like taught myself how to write like that because it was so like artistic. And my cool teenage sister that I always looked up to, and it's like I had no one to emulate. You were gone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write like this.
I made my
own. yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember you wrote a song for Kaylee, and our youngest sister is 7 years younger than Jill, and Jill being the oldest, I think you're always more mature for your age and had to step into a role of caregiver to us, probably more than you even wanted to, having 4 kids in the family. But I remember that Kaylee would have me sing the song to her that you wrote. And so I remember like I must have like made up a melody, or maybe you sang it once over the phone. And so I would repeat that song to her and almost like need to stand in as you for her.
Yeah.
I don't recall a lot of phone calls, to be honest. Right. I think they happened, but I think they were hit or miss or that kind of thing.
They were probably more often with mom and dad, because I want to say they were like 15 or 20-minute phone calls. They were at a specific time on the weekend. And I know our family was busy, so I'm just thinking about sports schedules and stuff. I remember different times, only being able to speak to one parent or the other. And there could have been missed calls too. Like you didn't really get a chance to make up a call if it didn't fit within the call window.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that feeling like it was a very like dark time. Definitely like, it's interesting. And I think, and I don't remember our order of our questions, but it doesn't probably matter. I appreciate you even letting me talk, because I feel like this trauma isn't mine, but like it is. And it's like I was actually telling my daughter today, I was like, geez, like, I mean, in some ways we had a pretty sheltered life. And although there was some religious weirdness that I now look back and I'm like, oh, wow, that was super extreme, or we were spanked or whatever, but it's a pretty sheltered life. And so, like, having someone taken from your family that is, you know, like one of your best friends that you were in my life since I was born, it's pretty traumatizing.
Right.
And so I've kind of like been looking, I'm like, is this called like, is it, I think it's like secondary trauma. And I think it's a
Yeah.
little bit of like a secondary and like a primary, like actual
Yeah.
trauma. Cause like, while my
Yeah.
trauma wasn't that I was taken away, it's that someone was taken from me.
Right.
And, and, you know,
And in a very important time of your life when things are
mhm,
getting confusing,
yeah,
and it can be hard, especially with some of the ideologies we grew up with, to go to
hmm,
mom for everything, especially as a
yeah,
young female coming of age. And I know that later in life I was able to be that for you when you needed it, but there was those years where you didn't have that option. You know, we all have that
yeah,
family dynamic, the family dance, and to go from being the second sister to suddenly being the oldest,
hmm,
um, it, you did you your life completely changed, and without you really understanding the why behind it. What did you understand about the why, and what was the time like right
hmm.
after that, kind of that dark time? What do you remember about it?
I mean, I, I have to say, like, I was pretty steeped in that church and the way that we were raised, and also like really that transitioning from a kid to a teenager was where I was at. And I, you know, I was just told that you did very, very bad things. And I don't even remember a ton of specifics, but I know that like mom and dad had like gotten a hold of your journal, and like they shared things like more broadly. But I remember just like, oh, it was major sins. And um, you know, I think that I was very much told that like you were going somewhere to help you heal and um, kind of cleanse you of these sins, and so that you could come back and be fully yourself and love God and that kind of thing. And so, you know, I thought, well, this, it's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't really talked about besides that.
Right.
And so I think I sent you a little excerpt from, I did find a couple journal entries from
Yeah.
myself from that time. And I kind of like, it seemed like I went from like, I miss you, Jill, like, where are you gone, to like, I was angry at you. And I think like I
Yeah.
didn't even know where to put my anger.
Right.
Um, and I think I wrote a sentence of like, they think I don't care, but I really do. And so I remember that's when my masking started. And I
Right.
know you guys
Right.
talked about that. And I was like, oh, geez. And thinking about it, yeah, like kind of moving forward, like I became very secretive. Like I stopped writing in a journal because I realized if I had anything that was out of line, it was going to be used against me, and that I would probably be sent to Texas.
Right.
So I have journals I actually found at a memory box, and I have journals with pages and pages that are ripped out by
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
because
I
they
have the
weren't
same.
safe.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's so I went there in August, and I was allowed to come home that December for a little visit. And I do remember coming home for the visit. I didn't remember the dates, so it was kind of cool to find it in the journal, but I made a note that it was 5 days. And because of the time I would have left, it really just would have been 3 days in the middle with a day of travel on either end. And then when I look at the journal and it shows what happened during those 3 days, one of the days was us going up to the mountains. Um, Another day had to do like full day church and family stuffs. And then one with family coming over to the house. So just a really jam packed whirlwind of 3 days. Um, but I wrote about it when I got back to the farm, and this was December 30th of 95. Can you believe it? One day left in this year. I'm a bit behind in my writing, so I guess today's the day that I'll catch up. I went home the 21st through the 26th. It was awesome. Dick and Ruth Tangent came over and prayed with us, and I feel such a releasing. It was great. Do you remember them?
Oh yes. Yes, I do.
Kaylee slept with me every night. She was so sweet. She would roll over and hug me in her sleep just to make sure that I was still there.
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. Um, Sorry, it gets emotional going back to these times, you know. I had written earlier in December how much I was looking forward to my visit and the things that I wanted to do. And one of the things I wanted to do was bake with my aunt. But I wanted all my siblings there because I didn't want to be away from them. So I think just that desperation to have every single minute of our time together during that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found this pictures. I think I sent you a few of them, and from that holiday, and like it's like we're practically hanging on you in every picture.
Yeah.
And I see there's one picture I didn't send you of me, kind of like off to the side, like, and I'm just kind of like sitting there, like I remember not even really knowing how to act. It
Yeah.
was, you know, such a different feeling.
Right. So
Yeah,
this part's kind of funny. On Saturday, we, just us kids and dad, went up to the mountains to inner tube and sled. Mom had cramps, but she met us afterwards at the Chimicum Cafe for an early dinner. I wonder if it really was cramps or just like she needed a minute. Let me take half a day and then meet you guys later.
maybe.
Let's see. I had such a fun time just being a family again. Sunday, I saw people at church, and afterwards, we went down to the Mervangs. Kelsey has grown up so much. That night, Grandma and Grandpa Slice came over for dinner and presents. It was good. Grandma got me this real soft blanket and cool earrings. I got some cute things from my family, lots of stationery. Hint, hint. I guess I'll be doing a lot of writing. At the candlelight service, I saw Elisa. I'm so glad I get to write her and Jessica now. Monday was fun. The Wallaces came over. And then I make this little tirade into dumping a glass of water everywhere. Grandma Julie and Grandpa Everett came over. They're such sweethearts. They paid for my plane ticket home or back to Texas.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. There's a lot of entries in here where I was concerned about the family's finances and about how expensive it was to send me to school there and feeling bad about it and really praying for Dad's business to be successful. Then it talks about leading a Bible study that night. Talks about me burning some old junk in the barbecue to get rid of any last traces of my past. It was so nice to get all the hugs I did. They'll have to last me a while.
It's hard to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were there when Dick and Ruth Tangent came over. So it's really to add some levity to this podcast.
Thank you.
I remember I've actually connected with other people who are past church members who knew them, and we've nicknamed it like, "Oh, you've had an exorcism with Dick."
Yeah.
That's essentially what it was. It was a prayer, but it was like we basically had an exorcism.
It was it was our Ed and Lorraine Warren of the church.
Yeah,
it totally was.
It was a rite of passage.
Yeah. So I can't read the part about my dad because I'll just be bawling in there. It just talked about how good it was to get hugs from him. But I left Tuesday morning at 4 a.m. It was really hard to say goodbye. I had to wake the kids up to say goodbye. It wasn't as hard because they were all half asleep. I had a hard time saying goodbye to Dad. Mom drove me to the airport. It was so sad for me, quite a flashback. I felt a lot different from the first time I went, but sad just the same. My plane was late because of problems with the cooling system, so Mom came and got me off the plane, and we got to spend a little more time together. Pre 9/11 plane protocols, right? I slept most of the ride and tried to choke down some nasty egg thing. I had a hard time eating anything because I felt so homesick. Sister Kelly and Hillary met me at the airport, and we went to Taco Bell on the way back to the farm. So just interesting to recap what it was and capture some of the emotions.
Mhm.
and be writing
Mhm.
about that trip. Um, I think I had another visit during spring before
Mhm.
graduating, and we just kind of found some pictures of that recently too. We did a trip to the Oregon coast. What do you remember about that trip?
Yeah, I remember we had a lot of fun. I remember going to those arcades, and I remember like chasing the waves, and I think I sent you the picture. It's almost like a modern picture where people aren't just standing and posing. It's all four of us siblings like just playing in the waves with this like old shipwreck behind
Yeah,
us on the Oregon coast, and we just like were all having fun and being kids. And I think it was like one of those. It might have been like one of the last moments you were allowed to be that,
yeah,
looking back, and
yeah,
you had a lot of that stolen from you. And you know, we had joy on our faces, so like I remember like
yeah.
having a lot of joy during that time. I
Right,
don't know what you remember it, but I remember it was like a big occasion that you're home,
right,
and that
right.
was a fun trip in my recollection.
I think it stands out so much because so much of our time before Holy Highway was memories like that. You know, we were out at the lake rolling down hills in inner tubes and, you know, playing on the beach until the sun went down and playing in the woods and just going on camping trips and hikes and playing
Hmm.
sports. We had a very full, fun childhood in so many ways.
Yeah, yeah.
That to have that family dynamic and as we knew it at the time where it should have been ramping up and creating more memories, we just
Hmm.
have these little spattering of memories during that time period. So I think I'm able to
Yeah,
see them with a better clarity because of how isolated they were in the way that
yeah,
they happened.
absolutely.
How do you feel your teen years were impacted by me being sent away?
Oh, like big time. They were impacted big time. I like I mentioned, like I learned how to mask as well, under a different type of scrutiny than you girls, women at Holy Highway. But I did have the fear of being sent there. Um, I I found a different writing I must have done at age 14, 15 about like how I I didn't really even want to do anything bad, but I wasn't allowed to do anything bad, and I just been grounded for 2 months. Like it was always just like extreme, like oh you told a lie, you're grounded for 2 months. And I remember whenever I would get in trouble, being told I was just like you, um, and that was like, and not that I didn't want to be like you in many ways, but I knew what they meant. They meant
Right,
you're on the path to being sent to Texas.
right, right.
Like you skipped your chemistry tutoring session and hung out with a guy for an hour.
Did
I don't like something lame.
did you start to question maybe the severity or extremity of what could get you sent to Texas?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Like don't dare try weed. Like I if I sip this alcohol, like this is this is scary. Yeah, I definitely I learned how to be around certain people, and I learned how not to be. I started questioning a lot more. I think that really you being sent to Texas, like um it made me feel like I have to walk on eggshells around certain groups of people and my own family, because
Yeah,
something's going to get back somewhere if I'm stepping out of line. And I was a pretty good kid, like a rule follower. And,
yeah,
but as I started becoming a teenager, and I think you being sent, it kind of rocked my world. I was like, wow, like maybe this way of life doesn't have my back. Maybe they're not
yeah,
right about everything. And then I also started, like I said, like not liking how people were being treated, not liking how they're put on display with their sins to confess to all. A lot of stuff
yeah,
like was leading me to question, really like the own core of what I believed. I remember, yeah, like the burning of your things. I started to have like, I've always been into music as well. I think we have a lot in common with that. And I remember getting like a Third Eye Blind CD and having mom and dad made me like read the lyrics, and then like made me like break the CD. Then I
yeah,
went and bought another one, and but I hit it. I
yeah,
learned I as I said, like I wasn't a rebel, but I was a normal teenage kid, but I learned to hide things. I think that
Right.
it impacted me is that I became a really good hider. I thought to myself, I literally kind of made a pact in my mind of I'll do what I want. They're just not going to know.
Yeah.
And what I did do wasn't that bad.
No, no, but it still had it created that mindset and
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of needing to have two versions of self. The one that you could be around family and around your church family or around your community, and then the real you inside. And you had to question when it was safe to be the real you. And was it acceptable to have those parts and pieces, or did that make you bad in some way or have something to feel any guilt over? Because I do
Mm-hmm.
remember those feelings of guilt. I've got some excerpts in my journal where I'm saying I don't think I did anything wrong, but God, if I did, then by all means I deserve what's coming to me, kind of a thing. But that hypervigilance in a young person of looking for, okay, what am I going to get in trouble for? What am I not doing right? But that sense of foreboding or
Mm-hmm.
fear in some ways about being authentic.
Absolutely. I was just telling my daughter, who's really big into the performing arts, and I do a lot of coaching and running lines with her and all that, and working through some of this and listening to all of your interviews. I told her I was like, I did a little bit of theater as a kid, but I ended up going in the sports direction. But I was like, do you know why I'm a good acting coach for you? And she's like, why? And I was like, because I had to act every day of my life growing up, and I always stayed in character, and I learned that really well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
Wow.
freaking sad,
Yeah.
but I was like, yeah, I know how to stay in character.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
You
goodness.
guys do. I know you do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The survival
That's a,
instinct.
yeah. Yeah. So
Or you get sent to
fascinating.
Texas. Yeah.
Right? What are you going to do? Send me to Texas?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you said
Yeah.
that phrase a couple times
Absolutely.
in
Yep.
your teenage defiance.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Do you remember anything about mom and dad's maybe personalities or emotional state in that time after Texas? I know it had to be very emotional for them. I just wonder how they processed, if they seemed to do it privately, or did you witness any of it?
Yeah. I remember vividly, like after the first time you went away. Yeah, I could actually speak to both times that you were
Okay.
sent, and then I feel like it's a whole different picture when you left for good and end up getting married and all that,
Yeah.
after graduation. But the first time you were sent to Texas, um, mom could barely function. Like she would get us to school and then just go back home and go to sleep for the rest of the day. Like it was almost like she was medicating herself and just passing out, but I don't think that she was. Um,
Right.
but she just dealt with it by sleeping and napping all the time and just doing the bare minimum and not talking about it. I don't remember having many conversations about um, any feeling like I missed your sister or this or that. It was just kind of like a shutdown, and I'm gonna sleep and be quiet about it,
Hmm.
avoidance. But
Yeah.
I believe that she was very depressed. Um, Dad just kept himself very, very busy.
Yeah.
Um, it was, he worked more, longer hours. He coached the teams. That was kind of like the only time I saw him,
Yeah.
which was when he was coaching. I would sometimes go, like our dad has always raised cattle, different properties, that kind of thing, and I would often like go ride with him to go out and feed the cows just so I could spend time with him because
Yeah.
otherwise I didn't feel like I would see him. So he also didn't talk about it a whole lot. He was on the church board and just so busy. I think he might have still been playing on a church basketball league and that kind of thing. But I felt like us kids that, we were kind of just left to deal with our emotions on our own because they were just unable to process it.
Yeah. So the second time I went away, I was supposed to be coming back. I went because I had a plane ticket, a return plane ticket in hand that I didn't
Hmm.
end up using. But do you remember me going away, what was told, and then how you found out I would not be coming back?
This is going to be really hard for me to share. I do remember it quite well. So we had gotten, I think, kind of a renewed license on our sister friendship when you came back between times. I remember having so many good times with you that summer of '96. We would go on walks on the beach. I remember our shoes being stolen and chasing a guy down across town, and we found him. um, I remember like being switching to public school and our rides into school, and I was so cool because like I had a high school sister to drive me in, and I remember the music we listened to. You know, I remember listening to Cranberries and Garbage and 311 and Nirvana, like all the music of the '90s
Yeah.
was like my soundtrack to that fall. And
I was resaturating myself with
oh
all the
yeah.
music I had missed while I was away.
um, so I remember that time, and you know, for Chris, like leading up to the holidays, yeah, I remember some more tension with you and mom and dad about different things and about your new boyfriend and that kind of thing. But yeah, I do remember that you were going back for a visit, and then I don't recall when I found out you weren't coming back from that visit, but I actually went not with our home church, but I went with a different church on like the day after Christmas down to Mexico to like go work at an orphanage. So I went down there for like 8 days after Christmas. I was picked up from our other family place down in Centralia by like the bus driving down to Tijuana, and so it wasn't actually till I came back from that trip. I don't believe that I was told you weren't coming back until I returned in like early January from
Yeah.
that trip. And the way that I found out was I walked into my bedroom, and your bed and all of your things had been placed in my room because they were mine now because you were gone. And I had your bed, the same comforter. I think that your dresser got put in there. My stuff was my little kid stuff or whatever. It was not there,
Yeah.
and everything was you, and it smelled like you, and it was you, and I freaked out. I remember because like the Lindsey that like masked and held it together, I unleashed, and I remember screaming and crying and like throwing things. And I know that her parents had never seen that side of me, but I was just like, no, no, no. Like I just had like a panic attack
Yeah.
because I knew what that meant, and that was final.
Yeah.
And it never was the same to me after that. That was
No,
like, it was final.
I was 17 at the time. And that stretch where I was home between my two stays at Holy Highway was the last time it felt like I was a kid.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
vividly remember that summer of sprinting barefoot on the beach and just being home. I
Yep.
joined a rec team for soccer and was looking forward to school. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there was just that brief sense of things feeling normal. As the fall wore on, there were more tensions, and then yeah, by the end of December, I was back in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
When I came home, it was after graduation, and I don't even think I was home for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given an ultimatum, and I I left home at 17. At that point, it was just a couple month and a half shy of my 18th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
But it this Holy Highway chapter really changed the dynamic in our family in a big way. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you think there's any lasting impacts that our family might even be dealing with today.
Oh, absolutely. I think, sorry, it's interesting because over the years, like, through our adult lives and stuff, I think I have actually told mom and dad that they're going to have to deal with this, like that you can't just ignore this away. It happened. I've
Yeah.
stopped telling them that. But oh, I think just even the stories of it, like I did actually listen to one of your I can't remember her name, the one that ran away. I listened to a little bit of that with Kenzie and
Yeah.
my 11-year-old, she's a firstborn. In a lot of ways, she reminds me of you. Um, I I don't know what the impact, but I think, I think in some ways it's made us realize what we aren't going to do, um, as well as learn like a different level of forgiveness
Yeah.
that I think I didn't know that I was capable of. Um, Gosh, it's really hard. I know that it's I've said to my daughter, and she's like, "What is this even from?" Is as I say sometimes, no matter what you do, like I will never send you away. And
Yeah.
she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, She's like, "What is that an option?" And I'm like, "No, it's not." And she's like, "Why did you say that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
good."
Yeah.
Just like
Oh,
weird
it's
things I do as a
interesting.
parent that are
Yeah.
rooted in like my fear.
Yep.
Um, I mean, I know that your kids, the conversations I've had with your two kids, that it has impacted them. And, you know, it's, gosh, yeah, it's hard to say all the ways. I have thought, and I appreciate, like, I think you and hearing the other stories, of some of the grace that you have for where your parents were at
Yeah.
allows me to not just harbor anger and resentment.
Right.
That I've been able to let go of a lot of that and see, like, yeah, like, do I think they made the right decision to send you there? No, I disagree with what they did. But I also see that with the tools they had and the mindset they had, I don't think it was of ill intent.
Right.
And they thought they were doing it out of love. Um,
Right.
and so like I can kind of like hold space for that conflict and that feeling like they had to do that.
Yeah.
But I also feel frustration that it's like, did you vet this place? Like this is was this
Yeah.
legal? Like, I don't
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's certain things that I think the maybe the picture that was painted for the parents about what this place was a glossier version of the reality of what it was. And I don't know that you could truly prepare the parents for what it is as well. And, kind of linking it back to God as the ultimate authority, if our parents are being told in that era, and you have to remember the 90s were a different era in evangelical church, even than they are today. So if you feel that it's your duty to do something and you don't know what that something is, but you feel that God has put this in your path and this is the option that's being laid before you, that you're stepping into alignment with God's will by doing this. Like it really
mm-hmm,
adds this layer of complexity to the choice and
mm-hmm.
almost externalizes it from the parent's own decision at that point and makes it more of an obligation based on their commitment to their faith.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that it's interesting because like some of it working through this, like I don't realize that it came from this experience of you being sent
Mm-hmm.
there, but it's like, wow, maybe this did. But I think a lot of where I've aligned as an adult is that I don't see that people are flawed. I see that people are people, and we are. I believe like we have a core of who we are, and it's not something that needs to be fixed or
Yeah.
is broken and should just put a band-aid on it. I think that like there's like you've mentioned, like there's well, what's causing this? Like what is the root of what's going on? Like let's dive into this. Was there a trauma that happened? Is there like a lack? Is there love? Is there something that this person needs to feel that can cause them that can allow them to fully be themselves? And I see that places like Holy Highway or some of the things I've heard about like conversion camps, like where you're gay and you're sent to like get the gay out of you. And
Yeah.
a lot of those stories, while someone may change on the outside for a while, they often, when they're allowed to speak, they're like, well, no, it's still me inside. Like, this is still me. Like, I'm still
Yeah.
gay. I'm still a little bit of a rebel, or I still think outside the box. And I think just it's caused me to really move away from anything that is like a quick fix with a disguise, and to really be open to kind of getting to know people and life and humans on a deeper level, and just
Yeah.
meeting them where they're at, and
Right.
being open to that, and having a lot more grace. So if
Yeah.
any beauty has come out of it, I think it's made me a more gracious person.
Yeah. Yeah. It is challenging because yes, we can go through something that hurt us, and yes, people
Mm-hmm.
that we love may have put us in that position, but we can still have relationships beyond that. A couple of years ago, Dad had reached out and said he wanted to have lunch, and at lunch he had a list of questions, and they were all about Holy Highway. He had clearly put some thought into it and wanted the answers, and I, I don't know if I was able to answer them fully. So at some point, I'll probably reach out to him and hopefully do an episode with him as well, and maybe revisit some of those questions again now that I've had time to think about it. But his questions, I don't even remember how I answered them necessarily, but they kind of unlocked things that I started processing in the weeks to follow that meeting with him. It's just you don't think about things for a while. You start thinking about them again, and these little questions come up, or maybe I would have
Mm-hmm.
answered them a little differently. And at that time, I hadn't watched some of the newer documentaries that have come out about the troubled teen industry and wilderness programs and other programs similar to Holy Highway. And listening to some of the other survivors that had gone through experiences like this, putting into their own words some of the emotional and psychological fallout that they're still dealing with in their adult life, made
Mm-hmm.
me reconnect to my past in a different way. That a lot of this perfectionism, we don't talk about things, we just move on and press on, and stiff upper lip type mentality, that these people, it almost unlocked something in me to go, okay, it's okay to feel that chapter. It's okay that it's still impacting you. If you're almost in tears listening to this person's story because you can relate to them so hard because you went through something so similar, like maybe it's time to look back, show yourself a little bit of um, grace,
Mm-hmm.
and give yourself permission to grieve if you
Yeah.
haven't gone through grief. Because I know that every one of us that experienced this school, and every one of the siblings and family members left behind, felt the profound impact and that line of demarcation in our lives of pre-Holy Highway post. For some, it was positive based on what their scenario was going into it. But then
Mm-hmm.
for some like us that had, in many rights, a very charmed childhood,
Mm-hmm.
very fairy tale compared to many,
Mm-hmm.
um, that this was definitely that dark chapter for us, and hardened us in certain ways that became part of who we would be even into our adult lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And I think that even as an adult, I've kind of bottled this up some, and I even like felt like, oh my gosh, should I come on here and talk? Like, do I have any right to act like I have trauma from this? Like, I still deal with that because um, I know I wasn't the one sent there. And I think that that is something though, is like I don't say first world problems anymore, because guess what? They're problems. You got them, I
Right.
got them.
Yeah.
It's trauma. It
Yeah.
happened to the siblings. It happened to the people sent in a much, I think, more extreme way. Um,
Yeah.
but it's trauma, and I think it's everyone has an individual experience of it. And you're right, and I appreciate you talking about it. I think that family members are or whoever's listening, hopefully is getting some healing from this, because it hasn't been a topic that's been allowed to be talked about, but
Yeah.
it's impacted so much. But yeah, I think that I also kind of dealt with a need to kind of, button my lip, because compared to being sent there, it wasn't that bad. And it's like, well, that's super true. But
Yeah.
yeah, like it was
Just
also
because
pretty
you don't
bad.
see, yeah, and just because you don't see what you went through as extreme or as traumatizing as someone else's doesn't diminish what you went through in any way, because it still shaped your experience. It still
Yeah.
caused these deep emotions that clearly are still evident today as we go back and revisit that chapter. I mean, this is hands down the most emotional episode for me yet, because of the connection of the person on the other side. You know, these other women,
Yeah.
we built these bonds for a 9 month stretch, 18 month, 2 year stretch of our life, but we weren't allowed to be close like this. It's not like we shared a
Mm-mm.
bathtub as toddlers. We weren't, you know, we spent every day together. So,
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people that I meet now think that I'm a firstborn, and so I think about what did this bring out of me that I don't even see in myself, where I had to be the firstborn
yeah.
for
And I
a
can even
portion of my
see
life.
that in our family dynamic now, of you take on a lot of the roles in the family that naturally a firstborn might. You're usually one of the organizers of events, and there's just different things that I'll see you just naturally seem suited for and naturally slip into this role. And some of them might just be personality strengths and your proximity and location and schedule, or any number of things. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them really are, because that role of eldest sibling did shift to you, and it never quite shifted back, because I was never back in the family dance the same way ever again.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot.
Well, yeah. Anything else you would like to share? Any fun or funny memories, or just words of wisdom to the other siblings out there?
Oh gosh, yeah, I think that I don't know that I have anything funny versus what I shared earlier about the exorcism. But I think that, first I want to say, like, thank you to all of the women who are coming to talk with you, that, like, your stories are worth it, even if they don't feel like they are. That it's like we're listening and we've got you. Like, whether you feel like you had a great experience and this really shaped you in a positive way, or not so much. Like, I just think that you're all really brave, because it's really hard. I can't imagine how that feels to dredge that up if you haven't talked about it. And I think for the siblings, I would say that, like, you're valid. And, like, my cousin mentioned something to me, like, I think she's probably going to listen to this. She said, you're you're really pulling out a lot that, like, that young Lindsey needed. Like, kind of like the young Lindsey was missing a lot during that time, and she's still in here. And so
Yeah,
I'm kind of like coming on here and sharing is kind of taking care of that hurt girl that was
right.
only 12 when her sister was sent away. And
Yeah,
I'm seeing my daughter at that age, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is such a formative time. And I think the siblings, especially, if they were under age 18, yeah, I think that what you experience is valid, and processing it is valid. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, thank you for letting me share, and
absolutely.
I love you so much. Grateful for
Love you
our
so
friendship as
much.
adults.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to give us a like. And if you think that this might help someone on their journey to healing, please share it with them. Thank you all, and have a great day.